My journalistic and intellectual superiors over on CNN tell me that Donald Trump will not be on many ballots for 2024 because of the 14th Amendment. Now, they're a lot smarter than me. They're better in every way, but I don't know. The 14th Amendment came out of the Civil War. The language pertaining to insurrection suggests that a person who actually waged insurrection would in fact be disqualified. And last I checked, despite the upwards to 100 criminal charges against Donald Trump, none of them involve insurrection. In fact, of the 1,000 people charged in the events of January 6th, none of them have been charged with insurrection. So, well, again, everyone at CNN is smarter than me, better than me, so I'm not going to go there. But maybe Hans von Spakovsky can help me out. He's a senior legal fellow over at Heritage Foundation. He knows a thing or two about the Constitution, worked in the Justice Department. All right, Hans, how does the 14th Amendment apply here?
Well, in fact, you are smarter than the people at CNN, because all of these efforts to use the 14th Amendment are doomed to failure. What they're trying to use is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Remember, that amendment was passed right after the Civil War. They put a provision in because they didn't want former Confederates serving in Congress and in the federal government. So they put in a provision saying that if you'd engaged in insurrection or rebellion, you could not serve in federal or state office. There are many problems with trying to apply that to Donald Trump. The first one, of course, as you just said, he's never been charged or convicted of that. In fact, when the Senate had the opportunity on that issue, remember, they found him not guilty.
Oh, during the impeachment process. That's right. He was charged. He was impeached with insurrection, but he was literally found not guilty.
No, that's correct. But the other thing that CNN analysts and others seem to be ignoring is the fact that Section 3 has a unique provision in it. It said Congress could basically get rid of it with a 2/3 vote of each house. There's no other amendment in the Constitution that's got a provision like that. Congress did exactly that. In 1872 and 1898, they passed two amnesty acts that got rid of the disqualifications in Section 3. So yeah, trying to apply it under all these circumstances just doesn't work. And by the way, every lawsuit so far that has been filed over this issue, and remember, numerous such suits were filed last year trying to get members of Congress disqualified, they all failed.
Okay. So this is very important. So you're telling me 25 years after the Civil War, the thought process was, okay, it's been a quarter century. Let's just, if anyone happened to be, you know, maybe a ranking officer in the Confederate Army and now they want to run for Congress, we're going to go ahead and do away with this. Because I thought that language about 2/3 of Congress in the 14th Amendment was on an individual case-by-case basis. You're telling me that they basically just overrode the whole thing back then?
They did. Now, the 1872 Act had some exceptions, so it still applied. But in 1898, they got rid of all of those.
Wow.
So it basically disappeared. Look, the other big problem, of course, is if anyone had any power to do anything about this, it would be the Congress, not some lone state official deciding that a particular individual is not qualified to be president.
That was my next question, because we've got secretaries of state and attorney general in certain Democrat-run states right now who are saying just that. Michigan, Wisconsin, they're talking about actually doing this on a state-by-state basis. You're saying even if they tried, this is something that has to come out of D.C.?
Yeah, and in fact, there's a decision out of the Arizona State Supreme Court last year when again, an attempt was made to get some congressional representatives from Arizona off the ballot. And the Arizona Supreme Court pointed out that not only had none of them ever been charged with insurrection, but more importantly, there was no federal enforcement statute for this particular provision. And so they dismissed the claims that these people shouldn't be on the ballot.
Right. See, this answers my next question, because you see, Michigan will say, Gretchen Whitmer and the Secretary of State there, they'll say, well, listen, this is a Michigan thing. We've determined that this is the case. But the fact that it affects the Electoral College and it affects the election of the president, Michigan just can't unilaterally do that because it disenfranchises voters in Alabama, right?
No, that's right. And look, we just got a decision from a federal court in Florida tossing out another claim made by this. And what the court said quite correctly is that the average voter doesn't have standing to assert a claim like that. In other words, they don't have the ability to even bring such a claim. And you know what they're relying on, Larry, is remember when Barack Obama was the first president, there were lawsuits filed saying he wasn't qualified to be president because he wasn't they claimed a natural-born citizen
Oh, the
of
birth
the US.
certificate thing. Yeah, okay.
Right. And those cases all got dismissed because the court said voters didn't have standing to bring a claim like this.
So in other words, they're kind of using a similar tactic, different provision of the Constitution, but these guys who try to get Trump off the ballot are basically using the same tactic as Obama birthers back in 2000.
That is exactly right.
I love that sweet irony. All right, so listen, apparently we've got the Constitution on our side, we've got the law on our side, we've got precedent on our side, we've got logic and reason on our side. Hans, that's not going to stop Democrats. There's going to be one of these states. No. They're going to do it. So how does this play out exactly?
Well, if, for example, a Secretary of State, say the Michigan Secretary of State, decides that he can't be on the ballot because of the 14th Amendment, then the Trump campaign will sue. And I can tell you that that lawsuit would probably very quickly get all the way up to the Supreme Court because the courts know they've got to make a decision before the primary. And by the way, just some very, very recent news. This has already reached the U.S. Supreme Court. A petition for certiorari, in other words, a request to review, has just been filed with the Supreme Court by a guy out of Florida who claims he's a Republican candidate. His name is Castro, and every lower court threw out his case. So he just filed a petition with the Supreme Court asking them to review the case. If they turn it down, that'll be a sign to everybody else that you don't have a claim.
But again, it hasn't stopped them before, so they will drag this out.
Correct.
This is obviously doomed to failure, but it's meant to be another layer, another pile-on, there's more drama with Trump and all of these things. It's meant to basically give this message that the man is disqualified or incapable of actually running for president.
Right, and to cause him practical problems, because at the very same time he's trying to campaign, trying to fight off all these criminal prosecutions, now he may have to go to court to fight these meritless efforts, these other lawsuits, to get him off the ballot.
Which costs more money and will give him more chance. I mean, right. We know that the pressure on attorneys right now who take up the case of Donald Trump, it's almost like writing a death certificate for their own legal career because they're being ostracized in the legal community.
Well, not just ostracized, but the lawyers in Georgia who were providing him with advice and counsel are being criminally prosecuted by Fannie Willis, the local DA, for doing their job, trying to represent their client.
Could, not to extend the lawfare issue here, but these states' attorney general, these states' secretary of states who try to do this, which on the face of it seemed incredibly legally precarious, let's say, to say the least, this is election tampering. They're trying to tamper with the election, with their office, with their elected office. Is there a case to be made against them for doing that? Like a legal case?
Well, I think that is, unfortunately, probably not. Attorney generals and others, unfortunately, can get away with a lot. If an attorney general were to engage in this kind of misbehavior, well, maybe the state legislature could impeach that AG for their misbehavior. Yeah. But of course, in a blue state, that's not going to happen.
It's not. It is interesting, though. You know, they tell us how bad Donald Trump is. They tell us how, they're throwing, like I said, 100 criminal charges against him in 4 different jurisdictions. They say he's, evil incarnate and shouldn't go anywhere near the White House. He's been twice impeached. And yet he's tied with Joe Biden in the latest national poll. And now they're doing whatever they can to keep the people of their own states to be able to vote in the election. I mean, I would think if he was that bad, they'd have confidence in their own citizens that they would vote against him. But clearly they don't. That tells you something. We'll leave it there, though. We're out of time, sadly. Hans, thank you. Always great stuff. And thank you for giving some perspective. Sadly, I don't think they're going to invite you on CNN. But we can. There's more to come on O'Connor tonight.